In this video I am making a diorama inspired by the scene Lighting of the Beacons, one of my favorite sequences in the Lord of the Rings films and therefore also one of my favorite sequences of any film. Welcome to another episode of PKT Crafts. To get a somewhat correct scale, I started with the miniature, then make the environment from that. I removed the mold lines with a new sharp blade on my hobby knife before painting. I like the way it turned out, but the hat screams Wild West, not Middle Earth, so I had to cut it off. I used liquid green stuff to sculpt a mane of hair. I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. What do you think? I use a piece of plywood as the base, and I'm making a quick sketch just to give myself an idea of the layout. I'm always using a mask when I'm sanding XPS foam or anything else that makes dust. I used the same piece of XPS that I cut away to make the door. I glue a thin sheet of balsawood to the foam and add small cast iron details from paper strips and bent wire to make the door handle. Now I need to cover the structure in many small rocks. At this 1/72 scale, I would be mad to add individual rocks, so I'm trying something new. I cut thin strips from this cork sheet and make small cuts halfway in. The idea is that when I wrap this around the hut, it will look like many rocks. It turned out okay, but too jagged near the top. The wire brush gave the cork a more interesting surface texture and also removed some parts, giving the hut more character. Still, the rocks looked way too big, so I cut each strip in half, doubling the number of rocks. It took a little time, but I actually enjoyed the process. I imagine that the people that made the hut also made the beacon, so I used the same technique to give both structures the same type of look. For the firewood, I bought this pack of 8 pairs of chopsticks and broke them to size. I also used some matchsticks since I was 2 chopsticks short, and because I want a different size of wood, of course. I didn't want the wood to look square, so I rounded the ends. The stained bath is made from water, brown and black inks and white acrylic paint. I've never made a stain like this before, so I can't give you any precise measurement, but I added parts until I got the color I liked. I used No More Nails construction glue to fix the sheet of thin XPS to the plywood. I actually found this foam sheet in the trash. To be extra safe, I used kilograms instead of pounds. I left the wood pieces in the stained bath overnight, then took them out and dried them. And they came out looking great. In my initial sketch, I had the beacon positioned parallel to the base, but I think this angle is more interesting. A hot wire is definitely on my shopping list. That music always gives me goosebumps. So I took my 2-part silicone mold putty out in the sun. The putty cures after 20 minutes and can be used right away. I mixed up a small batch of plaster and the result, rocks. I added paint to the next plaster batch just to make it easier to see in the video. I wet the castings before placing them, or else they will suck up any moisture from the grey plaster and things will crack and look bad. Before everything is dry, I try to blend things together a little bit. The hut did not fit the space and there was a gap under the door, so I cut my way down to the plywood and it looks a lot better. I made yet another plaster mix, but this time I added Mod Podge for strength and a lot more water to not lose too much detail. This is just a top coat to blend everything together. Every crafter these days have a transition clip from not primed to primed. I'm no different. To bring out some more detail, I coated everything in a cold, dark blue oil wash. After a day of drying, it looked very flat. I mixed up another plaster mix, adding acrylic paint to the mix to try and match the color of the base, and smeared a thin layer on some baking paper. When that was dry, I could crush it into thin pieces of slate type rocks. I brushed away some of the rocks where I imagine people have walked the most. I then sealed it in place by spraying it with isopropyl alcohol, then adding watered down PVA glue. When that was dry, I gave everything a dry brush with a titanium buff light color, complementing the cooler oil wash. Agrex Earthshade was added to the base of the beacon to illustrate that tin oil has been poured all over. It also gave the scene a bit more color and interest. More tin oil to bring the wood and the base together. In the scene in the movie, there are two characters at the outpost. I bet one has the job of keeping an eye on Amundine and Nardole, the other beacons, and the other guy is inside the hut keeping the fire going. I hope they take turns. The base still looked a bit boring and uniform to me, so I added some snow flocking mixed with PVA glue to a few select places. last thing I did was painting the sides black, and with that, it's done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed making it. Consider subscribing to my channel, and if you have any questions or suggestions for future builds, please comment below. Also, a huge thank you to Boylai Hobbytime for hosting this Outposts Art Challenge for his patrons. See you next time.